So this will be a video based on the kind of post-awakening process that I went through. If you haven't seen the first video about the kind of lead up to this experience, then I recommend checking that. The reason I share this is because this is purely a very interesting. It was a very interesting journey. It was a very interesting story, and I love stories. I love to tell stories, and this is the story of this life. Some people, they won't resonate with stories. They think stories will be a hindrance on the path. If that's you, then maybe you should stop listening, because what you're about to hear is a story about what I went through as this body and mind through this life, after understanding what I am. And let's begin. So, on the last video where we left off, essentially, I think I took us to the point where I understood where I had the hell experience. And after that experience, I was essentially greeted by my future self. I didn't think I was going to share this in the video, but I'm just going to do it. I was greeted by my future self, who told me that I basically had to go through the journey now in time. And that journey in time is basically the context for the state, for lack of a better word, that I had recognized in that experience. And the state that I recognized in that experience was just absolute pure forgiveness, which is to give everything the freedom to be completely as it is without any desire to change it, and understanding exactly what I am on a level that is just absolute. Something you can't forget. You see, you don't come out of that. Obviously, in that experience, I did. You see, that was because there was no context for it. So the path that I went on then was building context. And he said that I would. He had grey short hair, and so he had grey short hair and like this kind of little belly. And the only way I can explain it is that I was him looking at myself in the mirror. And so if I looked down, it was me, but if I looked in the mirror, it was him as an old man. And it was as if he was coming to unbind me from the hell experience. So the loop, or the thing, the cycle that I was in, or the cycle that I was completing, he came to take me out of the cycle, to essentially, I'm still comprehending this to this date, to kind of free myself completely. I can't put it into better words than that. Even though they don't sound they're a bit vague. And he kind of, it was like me, and I was a really old man, but I had like a beard, short grey hair, short grey beard, maybe like a little bit shorter than it is now. And I remember I kind of looked like my granddad on my mother's side. And it was just me. I just had my nose, my little beard, my short hair, and then this belly. And I could feel his belly mine was filled with trauma. Mine was filled with the trauma of the experience that I just went through, which was massive, to put that lightly. And it was as if I was holding kind of hell, in a sense. Like prior to it, it's like the trauma was stored in my stomach, basically, from the experience. And his belly was, it was like he was pregnant with the universe. it's the only way I can describe it. It was like the purest love. I can't explain it. The only way I can think of it is like he was pregnant with love itself, and it was like a universe in his stomach, just right there. So, and he basically said that the process I'm going through is transmuting this, or he didn't say it in those words. I don't remember the words that he actually said. I remember the sentiment and the essence, but it was like, you'll now go and learn this, understand this in time. This was an understanding transcendent of time that I had in that moment, and I will understand this in time now. It didn't make sense in this experience. It made no sense. It was like being kidnapped, blindfolded, taken to the top of the mountain, unblindfolded, and being like, here's the top of the mountain, but you don't know how you got there. So you're still at the bottom of the mountain on one level because there's no context. You see, this is why people seem to come down from these types of experiences to on an ultimate level. The experience is not really the thing, but we're going to get to that stuff. But so there was no context. So he basically said, now you have to find the context. Now you have to understand the context. You need to understand this, why this makes sense. Understand the path of understanding. It's the most important thing. Understanding is experiential. So experiential understanding, he's basically saying, now take the path of experiential understanding. And he's like, you're going to have a lot of shit to go through. You're going to have a lot of trauma to kind of process. You're going to have to process what you just went through, which was all the suffering that has ever happened, ever. And the experience of limbo and the experience of hell and all the condemnation and things like that. So you'll have to process that, and then therefore learn how to completely embrace. Like, it was easy to embrace it in that sense because it was a transcendent state, but it was like learning to embrace it in like the human state, in like the human condition, in like the day-to-day ordinary condition that everyone is experiencing. Not some special altered state of mind, but in this natural, normal human condition. So I had the taste of it, then I had to actually understand that from scratch, from the beginning, with all the trauma. So that's what I went through then. I couldn't leave my room because as he was explaining, the more I was coming down. So the more he explained the more he explained as if he was talking to my human self, my ignorance in a weird sense, but it wasn't ignorance in that sense, can't explain it. But the more he spoke to my normal self, the more I would kind of go back into like almost an ego, basically, like more of a separate self. So the more he spoke to me about what was going to happen, what was healing this, and then he told me that I would find my teacher. He told me that I'd find a guide or someone who later on I obviously found. We're going to get to that soon. And then I would go through a heal process, and then basically I would then kind of do videos like I'm doing today. It sounds so weird to actually share this out loud. So that happened, and then as this process was going through, he kind of just flew off, like just went to, I don't even know where. Later on, I found that this is my sixth. Apparently, this is like my sixth density thing. Like, I still don't really. I'm just telling you the story. I'm just telling you what's happened. I don't really have much investment in this anymore. My focus is primarily on what like I'm actually experiencing now. Do you see what I mean? This is why I rarely share this. I wasn't expecting to tell this part of the story today, but it just came out on the video, so I'm assuming that there's a necessity for it. So so he kind of left. I came back to normal, so to speak. And then as he left and I kind of came back to normal, my sense of separation came back in, which meant that I had then started to interpret any experience I had was then therefore filtered through the separate self. So the understanding that I had, I would look back on it as a memory, but I can't you can't really remember the actual experience of being because it's right here, right now. So because I didn't recognize the actual gold dust of the experience, I tried to remember the thoughts, feelings, and ideas that I had. That's the only things you can remember. So I would then interpret. Let's just say my awakened self was interpreting experience very vaguely, because you don't really need to do that when you're in that kind of state. And I'm interpreting it then, which is still an interpretation. Then I come back down and then I'm interpreting the interpretation. So I have a very, very, very terrible understanding of what I just went through. Plus, the trauma of the experience was so heavy and so dense, all of my energy was based on trying to forget the trauma. So basically, every part of me was trying to forget everything that had happened. I was left with two things. Either I'm God or everything is God. There's the only two things I knew. Then later on, a couple of days, I'd just seen an Instagram post from Alan Watts that was like, if you wake up in India and tell everyone you're God, if you wake up in the West and tell everyone you're God, you're going to a psychiatric ward. If you wake up in India and tell everyone you're God, or if you wake up in the East and tell everyone you're God, they'll say welcome to awakening or something like that. They'll say, join the club or something like that. I'm not quite sure exactly. And then when I realized that, it just kind of clicked. I just knew, okay, I am not God. Thank frigging God for that, because I didn't want to be. It was actually the worst feeling ever, because that was basically solipsism. And I realized that everything and everyone is God. I share the same being as everyone else, but I didn't understand how that made sense at all. And a part of me thought I was just insane. So anyway, I basically spent every second of every day trying to understand how to overcome the fear of death, because I felt my fear of annihilation. I didn't understand it. I didn't know how I could fear death knowing that I'm God, because I didn't actually know I was God. I just had this feeling that I'm God, but I still thought I was insane. So I wasn't sure. So the fear of death then, and the fear of going through what I just went through again, was so prevalent. I was incapacitated to my bed and I couldn't do anything. And eventually I would listen to whoever I could. At the time, it was like Osho, Ramdas, Maharaji, and just fill myself with like as much spiritual stuff as I could find. And then eventually the anxiety quieted down. And that was when I booked my ticket to go to the East. I went to Nepal, Thailand, Japan, India, some other places. And I wanted to find a guru. So I left to find a guru. And basically, there's a story on this if you want to check that out as well. I'll see if I can remember to put it there. After I had kind of numbed this chronic fear of death, which was almost as bad as the experience. I can't really say that's true at all. The experience is 10 times worse, but it was really bad. Anyway, I made it my life's mission, as if it already wasn't my life's mission at that stage. I made it my life's mission to do nothing else other than think, feel, act in direction of understanding what's actually happening. I needed to understand the truth. There was no other option. Any human thing, like actual human activity, just seemed stupid to me. It just seemed like, why would I do that when this is much more important? Like, this is a universal thing. Human thing is like, this is one tiny lifetime. Let me actually understand what's going on here. So I went to find the guru, traveled around, got to India, which was the last place I went. I went through Japan. There's a video on that as well. Went through Japan to try and find a dojo, went to hitchhiked across the country, found the oldest temple in Japan in Fukui, in this forest, basically kind of like fully on, almost intruded on their evening. Just complete idiot. I'm in flip-flops with an umbrella as a walking stick, and it's got a slight bend on it because I've been walking on it for so long, so I've got blisters all over my feet. And they basically, I'm Google translating with them, and they basically just like, go away. Like, why are you here? You're not from Japan. You shouldn't be here. I was like, no, but trust me, I'm a devoted seeker. Look at me. Look, I walked here today. It took me 4 hours, and I've been traveling for 3 days across the country, like borrowing lifts off random strangers. Like, I really, really do deserve to be here. And they're like, yeah, but you're not from Japan, so basically piss off. And I was like crying on the doorstep, and then the head monk comes, and I'm like, maybe he's going to let me in my head. I'm like bawling my eyes out on the step. And he comes and he looks at me and he's like, you need to move. And I'm like, no. And I walk outside, and then I'm like, but where do I go? And he's like, and I'm expecting him to be like, I have a quest for you. Like, here's your next mission. Go to this dojo at this place. And instead he just goes, if I tell you where to go, it means I have a favorite. So I have no favorites. So I will not tell you where to go. I was just like, fuck you, old man. And I just walked. I didn't think that at all. I just looked at him like one last, like, look at me, like puppy dog eyes, like, please take me in. And he just like nudges me on with his palm to get out. And anyway, and I get out on the street and I'm sitting outside the whole thing, just on the curb. Because like I have nowhere to go and I don't know where to go. And I just like walked 4 hours. And all of a sudden I see police coming, and I'm like, they're just like, oh, I wonder what they're doing up here. And all of a sudden they like walk over to me, and I'm like, and they're shining a light in my face, and I'm like, it's pitch black at this time. They're shining a flashlight in my face, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? They're like, I have no idea what they're saying because they don't speak English. I'm like, getting my phone. I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, we have reports of intrusion or something like that, trespassing, foreigner trespassing. Please come with us. And they take me in the police car. They say, where did you come from? And I said, oh, well, I came from this city. This is where I walked from today. They took me to that city, took 2 hours, and drove me to that city and just left me in that city. And I just slept on a bench on the street. And then woke up the next morning and went to the cheapest hostel I could find in Osaka, and then just stayed there for the rest of my time. It was actually really fun. So then that happened. And then I went to India, basically got ripped off by everyone, and found a guy, he gave me a contact. He told me to go to this ashram. I went to that ashram. I spoke to the guru there. He basically said, go home, meditations wherever you are. He gave me this story about Maharaji and this teaching. It was beautiful, but I don't want to talk too much about this. I've made a whole video on it. And then I was like crying, and I was like, what's going on with my life? Why am I like, I'm putting every single inch of every possible energy I could ever possibly give. What more do you need from me, God? Just give me my guru. Where is he? And when he told me that, obviously, go home, you don't need to find a guru. They just go, yeah, give me some pamphlets, give me a book called A Practical Guide to Yoga. He's like, take this, get back to the UK, live your life, stop pissing around. And I was just like, what is going on? Where else do I go? What do I do? I went back to the, and I realized at this stage, this is where I was holding on. I'd given up everything. I thought, God, I have given up everything I could think of. I've given up marriage. I've given up friendships. I've given up every worldly belonging. I had this tiny little bag, and it had like 5 pairs of underwear, 2 t-shirts, a pair of shorts, and a pair of trousers. That was it. And I was just walking around this little school bag. And I was like, I've given up everything I can possibly give up without like getting rid of my underwear. If you want, I'll do that too. You know what I mean? Like, that was the vibe. Like, if you want me to give up my entire clothes, I'll do that, but they'll arrest me. So I'll keep, I'll keep my main clothes. And I realized the only thing I was holding on to was the need to find a guru. There was the one place I thought happiness will be found in a guru. Realized that and thought, oh my God, I've been spinning my own tail the whole time. I went to the ashram the next day, spoke to this Indian guy. He came up to me, we made friends. He told me about all these gurus and teachers and stuff. And he said, by the way, I think you should check out Rupert Spira. He's this like enlightened teacher from the UK. And I was like, from the UK? He was like, no, he's not. All the enlightened teachers are over there. They're wearing robes. They're over there in the mountains. They ain't in the UK, my friend. And he was like, no, trust me. Just like, listen to this guy. And I was like, all right. And he sent me a playlist, and he was like, start here, watch these, go there. And he had like this whole thing mapped out. The first video I watched was Rupert. And he said something like, the boy in a movie, he says, he said, searching for happiness in the world is like a boy in a movie searching the movie to try and find the screen in which he plays. The boy in the movie can never find the screen. The screen has to recognize the screen. And just in that moment, I was the boy in the movie searching for the screen. It just, like, my whole entire life, he just gave me an analogy. I was living the analogy. I was just living it. Like, I was the boy in the movie searching for the screen. It was like he just used an analogy that was actually not an analogy. It was actually my life story. So the impact that had, as you can imagine, was profound. Now, at this stage, I didn't think, oh my God, he's my teacher. I actually just still thought he was just this English guy who lived 3 hours away from my home, plain and simple, normal, but I knew that he had something about him. I knew that there was something different. I felt like if I asked him a question, he'd actually give me a good answer. So I started attending his webinars, his retreats, and all of a sudden I realized that everything he was saying was perfectly designed for my needs. So the way that my mind was, everything he said was just perfect. It was the missing puzzle piece to everything that I had doubted. So I had no more doubt. All I had was that there was a possibility that I can find a question and I can get an answer. So all I did was ask 10,000 questions to myself every single day. Literally, at this stage, I'd come home and I had nothing. So I just spent 30,000 British pounds over the course of that year that I was searching. So I had zilch. In fact, I was in my overdraft, which is like a debt. If you don't know what that is, it's like a debt. It's like if you got to zero and then you go into debt, and they let you spend for a certain amount of time, kind of like a quick little credit card type of thing. And I would sit on a chair every day, on this one chair. Maybe I'll show a photo of the chair. And I would wake up at 6 a.m. I would meditate, and I would sit in that chair all day. And all I would do is just read or listen to Rupert's meditations, or just literally sit there. I did sit there for 6 months, not doing anything, because I thought that I had to uproot my sense of lack by facing it. But for me, facing it meant forcing the sense of lack by not reading or doing anything to try and bring up the sense of lack. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So don't ever think of doing that. But the main thing was that I was listening to Rupert's talks, and meanwhile I was taking LSD again. So I started to take LSD again, and I had an experience where everything that I had ever experienced and everything Rupert had ever said came together into one place, and they didn't uncome together. And then I thought that was going to disappear, but it didn't. Then, as I was walking about my day, I started to do these contemplations, which were inspired by George Berkeley. I came across George Berkeley. So just to kind of map this, I came back from India after that experience, after finding Rupert online. I started attending his webinars, sat in that chair, and just listened to Rupert. I read all of his books that he'd had at the time, and every single thing that he said was exactly what I needed to hear. There was just complete understanding. There was not one rebuttal. I never had a single, yes, but this doesn't make sense, Rupert, because there was nothing like that. It was just, I could have written it to myself. It was as though I could have written it to myself. It's as if I could have got a piece of paper in front of me from the future, got the piece of paper and said, hey, this is exactly what you need to know, give it to myself. And it was just exactly what I need. It's the complete synergy. So when I was listening, everything was landing just as if, I can't explain it, complete synergy. So I absorbed everything almost instantly. So very quickly I started to adapt what he was saying to myself. And I started to adapt to my own experience, and I started to do my own contemplations, and I started to, and then whenever I'd get stuck, I would go to Rupert and I'd say, Rupert, this, and this. What do you think about this? How do I understand this limitation? And he'd just tell me, and then bam, complete and utter just clarity. And then I'd go away and I'd do it again. But primarily, most of my time was spent with myself. It wasn't spent with Rupert. It was spent with myself. I would go to Rupert, not as a last resort, but I would do all the work I could. So it made Rupert's job easy. I would do all the work I could to get to the highest place I could find. Then I would go to Rupert, and then he would help take me from wherever I was at. It made his job easy for him because I just devoted to understanding it myself based on what I'd learned and understood from his videos and his books and things like that. So that was when I started to realize thought yoga. And I would sit under a tree then for another year, and I would just get voice notes, and I would either voice note friends who probably got sick of me, or I would then eventually record the voice notes on my phone just to myself because I was probably pissing people off. So I was just overwhelmed. I was passionate. I was interested. I didn't care about removing my suffering. This was after. So before, when I told you I spent six months on the chair trying to face the sense of lack, I actually spoke to Rupert. You can see this video in one of my communities. I posted it in there where basically you can see him in the moment completely my sense of lack just evaporated. This sense of lack, this sense of resistance, sense of boredom, it just didn't come back after that. It was just complete surgical removing that tooth. It was profound, and there's a video of it that we can see. If you want to join one of the communities, I think it's in the free, but it's definitely in the mastermind group. I committed then to everything that Rupert had ever committed to. So I started to go to France. I attended some of Francis's retreats. I read Francis's books, which aren't really books. They're kind of more like transcriptions, but I read them. And then I listened to Jean Klein. Then I listened to Atmananda Krishnamenon. Then I listened to Christopher Wallace, and I listened to the Kashmir tradition, understood the Kashmir tradition. And then I listened to Greg Goode, who I'm pretty sure was also a student of Francis. And Greg Goode opened me up to George Berkeley. George Berkeley opened me up to developing what I now call thought yoga, which is a combination of Atmananda Krishnamenon, Rupert, Francis, Greg Goode, George Berkeley. I'm not sure if I said Rupert, but obviously Rupert, and kind of glued it all together. And I just sat there every single day and just contemplated the world. Every single day. This is the time where I went to that tree. If I remember, I'll put the tree on there. And I got seasons of the tree, like the tree when it was summer, the tree when it was winter, the tree in spring, the tree in fall. Because I just loved that tree. It was just like this tree that I used to go for a walk and just sit there and then record myself and think of new ideas. And eventually I'd think about time and space and the relationship with it and consciousness, and how, just basically just developing my intellect and my mind and deepening my understanding through my own direct experience. And then eventually I would sit to meditate. At this stage, I was still meditating every day. And what happened was, in India, I did a meditation teacher training. And at the same time that I met Rupert, I was in my meditation teacher training. This was a month before I left India. I would sit every day. At this stage, I was already sitting daily for 4 years. So at this time, I realized, why am I still repeating a mantra? Like, why is my attention, when I'm meditating every day, why am I still looking at a mantra? Why don't I bring my attention to God? Like, why don't I make God, like the knowing that I'm God, my mantra? This doesn't make any sense. Why would I put my attention anywhere else other than on God, on myself, on my being? But I didn't word it like that at the time. I just thought, I just know I'm God, that my sense of I am is God. The world is God. If I just bring my attention to being God, why didn't I just do that? So I started to do that. I started to just, instead of meditating, repeating a mantra, I would bring my attention to being God. And then eventually this started to at first this was quite it's a very subtle object. It's not an object. So my mind would kind of run in, and I repeat a mantra, but then like know God at the same time. So it's like the mantra would keep my mind focused, and then repeat, and then knowing I'm God, like this knowing of presence. I can't explain it, but it's knowing my being basically became more and more obvious. And then I would start to try and do this every single day. But in the daily activities, it was quite difficult. It was quite a challenge in the daily activities because I would just do things and forget what I am and going back into ignorance. So I had this little bracelet, and I wouldn't wear it. It was just like a chanting bead bracelet, but I would keep it in my hand, not to kind of chant through it, but just to have it, and it would remind me of my being. But still, it wasn't enough. So I used to go through the beads while repeating a mantra in the daily. Then I would sit, and then I would just rest in my being, and then I would use the breath eventually, and then the breath became more attractive than a mantra. So then I would just do the breathing, and I would just literally follow my breath while knowing my being. And then eventually no breath, like I used to see them, and I was like, using a mantra or the breath, this is like a crutch. They like crutches. And eventually you start to learn to walk without the crutch, and then eventually you're just resting in your being, complete pure meditation without any crutch, without any need, any vehicle to kind of calm the mind down or to kind of rest. You don't need to. And then I realized you don't even need to calm the mind down. I was like, I can think thoughts right now. I could think anything. I could do anything. And then eventually I would try to get up, and then I would forget again and go back into like being in ignorance. Eventually doing that every single day as often as I could, there was no need for a mantra anymore. I would sit down and I was already there in my being. There was like, you can't. And then I realized, wow, I've always been in my being. I've not like the whole mantra, this whole thing. It was like almost like this story that I had to use to convince myself to kind of like make it reasonable that I'm free. It was like I had to be convinced I was free. It was almost like I had to have some kind of like reason or excuse to be free. I couldn't just be free. I had to have a teacher, and I had to learn, and I had to do all these things, and I had to meditate, and I had to do all these, like, you know what I mean? It's like I had to have like specific requirements to then be free. And then when I realized that, I had no requirements, and I was like, I actually am free completely. And everything that I was doing to build context was basically like understanding how that is true. And then everything else that I was doing was just an expression of my love. So my meditations, my practices, my things, they were like so innocent, but they weren't really doing anything, but they were like expressions of love. Like they were like keeping me on track, so to speak, while I was kind of understanding the fact that I'm already free. So this obviously kind of blew my mind, but it was also so normal. And then I would carry about my day, and I'd do my contemplations. And this one time I was looking at an incense, and it was very straight. It was just going up and up and up, and there was no wind. So the smoke from the incense was just straight, and it looked like a static object. It looked like a sword. And then all of a sudden a gust of wind came as I thought. So when I thought a thought, as I was staring at this, you're kind of in a trance, I thought a thought, and the incense smoke wiggled in the middle. It was like perfectly straight, and then wiggled, and then went perfectly straight. And I realized, oh my gosh, I had just this complete clarity that my thought is pure consciousness. And when I think, I am waving consciousness. I am pure consciousness vibrating in the form of whatever the thing is. And then I realized everything is that. Everything in experience is consciousness vibrating in different forms and shapes. And then when I listened more to what Rupert was saying, it just made complete and utter sense. I'm kind of skipping a lot of realizations that I had. It's really hard to get it all fitting into this. I'm trying to get like the general overview of what happened. But basically then I asked Rupert, like, how do I learn what you do on these meditations? And he said, I don't recommend a fixed kind of practice. I recommend the kind of essence, the creative process that I'm taking. And when he said that, and he just said, I'm just describing experience. And then it just clicked. So this is what I'm doing. Because I was already doing it, but I just wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more about it. He said, I'm just describing experience. I'm just looking at experience and just describing how I see it. And then it just made it so evidently clear. Just describe experience. And if you have clarity on experience, you just describe it. If you don't have clarity, you ask a question. And then once you ask a question, it's easier to find an answer. It's easier to get clarity when there's a question. And then I started asking myself all these questions. And then that was how I built this thought yoga. And then eventually I wanted to share this with people. I told my friend when I was in a cafe, and I was like, I've been doing these explorations. And because he said something just metaphysical. I said, I don't see it in that way. I see it like this. And he was like, wow, I love that. Tell me more about that way of seeing. And I shared more about it. He's like, oh, mate, you need to host some meditations for me and some friends. So you need to share this with me. So I started hosting these meditations for free, just like every week. This was about 5 years ago now. And then eventually I realized, oh, Rupert was my teacher. Rupert is the teacher that I was looking for that whole time. It took me a while to clock it. And at first I was hesitant to admit it. It's like, but what if he's not my teacher? But he pretty much is. But what if he's not? And I felt like nervous, almost like I'm committing to saying something that might not be true. But Rupert is flat out, he's my teacher. He's the guru that I was looking for the entire time. I remember reading in John Klein's book, like when I first come home, still was attending Rupert's things, but not knowing he's actually my teacher. I was reading John Klein, who's in the Book of Listening, somewhere at the beginning. You'll probably see it if you read it. He said something like, someone asked a question like, how will you know when you meet the guru? And he's like, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you've already met your guru, and you're still like unclear. You still have too much noise in the way. You still have too much like expectation, and you still have too much like basically seeking energy in the way from helping you see that with clarity. And then I remembered that when I had this realization, I was like, oh my God, I did know who he was. Well, I had met him before, obviously, but I didn't realize it. So yeah, and in that stage, then I kind of just went through the integrate. All I was doing with these contemplations was the integration process, integrating my senses, integrating thought, feeling, and perception. So basically, how I perceive the world. Do I perceive an outside world or an inside world, or do I not perceive an inside or an outside? Do I perceive myself to be inside my head, inside the body? So this is kind of more the Kashmir approach. I started learning with Billy Doyle. If you guys know Billy Doyle, he was a student of John Klein. Billy Doyle focuses on the Kashmir yoga. I started to go to yoga classes with Billy Doyle online. I actually went to meet him in London and took my first class with him there, and that was where I learned more of the Kashmir, the physical body stuffness. So that's really, really kind of digesting all of this into every part of our experience. And now this is what I share now. I started this a year ago, so I spent about 3 or 4 years just not doing anything. Like I just integrated my understanding completely until there was just no other way to turn, no other direction to turn in. I knew I wanted to share this understanding, but I wanted to be completely ready for it. I didn't just want to like do it out of puppy dog instinct. I definitely had that, and I was aware of that, and I was aware that that's a normal thing, and I had compassion for it. But I knew when I was in this puppy dog energy, I was ungrounded. I still hadn't fully integrated my understanding, and I was still like really wanting to just share because it's just fun and I love it. Now I see this more like I see it with more wisdom now, because I don't just see it as like there's a responsibility to doing what I'm doing and to sharing what I share, because you have a responsibility to make it as clear as possible for people. You have a responsibility to actually act on the level of people and things, and that requires compassion, and you have to have that compassion and be aware of that compassion. You have to be able and ready to take on the responsibility of someone basically seeing you as a source of knowledge, seeing you as a source. I'm not ignorant to that. I think it's naive to not to give yourself the honor and not the honor and respect, but it's almost naive to deny what you're doing in a sense, because I am sharing this understanding. I sit on calls with people. People book one-to-ones with me. I'm sharing this understanding with people. People see me as someone that they can get something from. Obviously, my job is to stop people seeing me as someone they can get something from. But to do that, you have to share the understanding. One of the biggest things I learned from Rupert was that a true teacher is a friend. And this is what I devote my life to, is just to making friends and to helping people see that the only job I really have is to be what I am to the highest possible capacity so that you see that in yourself. That's the only thing, that's what Rupert did for me. I seen that I was like, I could see, it was like I could just see myself in him. And when I realized I could see myself in him, I stopped needing to ask him questions. And it's not, at first I answered my own questions, but then I ran out of questions. I was just happy. I was just happy and I didn't have any questions left. And then years went by and I'm just happy and I don't have any questions left. And then more years went by and I'm happy and I don't have any questions left. And then another year goes by and I'm thinking, I would really love to start talking about this with people and taking on the responsibility of actually helping people understand my own experience so that someone else can actually enjoy that too. So I don't really care about whether I'm right or wrong about the nature of reality. All I know is that I'm unconditionally happy. And if you want a taste of this, if you want to make that your experience, then I can share how this made me unconditionally happy, and then maybe that can help you too. Why? Because I think it's so fun. I think it's really fun. Like, if there was something more fun, I would be doing that. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I play guitar. Sometimes I play games. I have a Nintendo Switch 2 here. Like, my life is devoted to fun, and I optimize my life to fun. And if you want to learn about that, then that's what I'm here for. There's not much else to it than that. You see, I don't want to create this. It's sacred, but it's like, it should be normal. Happiness should be normal. Unconditional happiness should be normal for people. So this is what I want to do, is just see how normal can we make that. There was nothing really that abstract about my process in the normal sense. There was abstract things that happened and LSD trips and God knows what, but they weren't necessary for unconditional happiness. I was just such an idiot that I needed extra boost, basically. I needed extra help. I was like the kid struggling in class that needed like the teacher to come and help him every time. That was basically it for me. I needed that extra support, but you don't need that extra support. And I've devoted my life to refining my understanding to a point where I can explain it as best as humanly possible. Why? Because I just think that's a fun thing to do. It's just the way my mind works. It's the way my mind works. Not every mind works this way. The fact that mine does, I should probably act on it. And you should too. If your mind works in the same way or in similar ways, you should be doing what your mind is most best at doing too. Why not? It's fun for us to do. So I have a community. The link's in the description. This is where I actually share this understanding and guide people through thought yoga and meditations that I do. I hope you have an amazing day, guys. I'm excited to see you there if you decide to join. This was the general overview of the story that I've had. Like I said, this is just a story. None of it is required, but I can guarantee there'll be pieces to my story that'll fit your story, and I think that it might help. So have an amazing day, guys. Take care.